AITA for walking out after my family excluded me, then discovering a hidden lawsuit? I'm Jackson, 43, a husband and father, and when all of this happened, I had been married to Meredith for 14 years. Our son, Caleb, was 16, which meant he was old enough to notice when adults were politely lying and young enough to still look at me like I could explain it in a way that made sense. I was the guy who packed the cooler for family cookouts. I fixed loose cabinet doors at Meredith's mother's house without being asked. I carried folding chairs, picked up ice, paid for takeout when Brandon forgot his wallet, and somehow still got described as hard to please whenever I expected a basic thank you or a straight answer. I didn't marry Meredith expecting a war with her family. In the beginning, I actually admired how close they all were. Her mother, Elaine, could fill a room without raising her voice. She knew everyone's favorite dessert, remembered birthdays, sent cards, and had this polished way of making every family event feel planned but effortless. Meredith's brother, Brandon, was funny in that loud, harmless way that makes you overlook how often he makes life harder for everyone else. At first, I thought Elaine's little comments were just bluntness. When she said, "Jackson's very particular," after I asked if a contractor had been paid, I laughed it off. When she said, "Some people need everything explained in writing," after I refused to hand Brandon cash without knowing what it was for, I told myself she was from a different generation. When Brandon borrowed $300 and paid back $40 2 months later with a thumbs-up emoji, Meredith said, "He's trying," and I let it go. That became the rhythm of my marriage. Brandon needed help. Elaine made it emotional. Meredith made it about family. I became the bad guy if I asked where the money went. It started small. A short-term bridge, Brandon called it. 2 weeks, tops. "Man, I hate even asking," he told me once, leaning against my kitchen counter while Meredith pretended to wipe down a spotless stove. "It's just a timing thing. I've got money coming in." "How much?" I asked. He gave me a wounded look, like the question itself was an insult. $800. "For what?" Meredith turned around so fast the dish towel snapped against the counter. "Jackson." "What?" I said. "He's family. Don't make him beg." Brandon looked down at his phone, performing embarrassment. "Forget it. I shouldn't have said anything." And there it was. The little trap door in every conversation. If I said no, I was cruel. If I said yes, I was family. If I asked a question, I was making things tense. So I gave him the money that time. And the next time, I sent half. After that, I started saying no unless there was a clear reason and a clear repayment date. That was when Elaine started calling me difficult. She never did it directly at first. Not in a way Meredith couldn't explain away later. Elaine liked soft knives. At a barbecue, after I declined to pay for Brandon's new tires because he still owed me from 3 other short bridges, Elaine smiled across the patio and said, "Some people bring heaviness into a room without meaning to." Brandon laughed. A couple of cousins looked down at their plates. Meredith squeezed my knee under the table so hard I knew it was a warning, not comfort. "On the way home," she said, "you could have just let that pass." I did let it pass. "You got quiet. Because your mother insulted me in front of everyone." "She didn't name you." "She didn't have to." Meredith stared out the windshield. "You know how my mom gets." That sentence became her favorite shield. "You know how my mom gets." It was supposed to end the discussion. Elaine could say anything. Brandon could do anything. And I was supposed to absorb it because everyone had agreed Elaine was Elaine. I stayed quiet longer than I should have. Part of that was for Caleb. I didn't want him growing up around constant arguments. Part of it was because I loved Meredith, and I kept believing she would eventually see the pattern if I explained it calmly enough. But after a while, calm explanations start feeling like begging someone to care. The birthday dinner was at one of those mid-range restaurants Elaine loved, because she could act like the family had rented the room, even though we were sharing space with 3 other parties and a server who kept having to squeeze behind Brandon's chair. Meredith wore a cream sweater she had bought 2 days earlier. Elaine had brought flowers for the table. Caleb sat beside me, scrolling through sports scores under the table and looking up whenever someone said his name. For the first 20 minutes, things were normal in the family way. Loud, polished, and full of comments that sounded harmless if you didn't know the history. Elaine asked Caleb about school, then told him, "Your father was always very serious about grades too, I'm sure." I said, "He handles himself fine." Brandon grinned. There he is. The auditor speaks. Meredith laughed too quickly. I looked at Brandon. Good to see you too. The conversation moved on, or pretended to. Elaine kept glancing at Meredith. Brandon avoided looking directly at me, which was unusual for him. Usually, he enjoyed poking at me until I reacted enough for Elaine to call me intense. When the cake came, everyone sang. Meredith smiled, blew out the candles, and leaned into me for a photo like we were any other couple. Her hand rested on my shoulder for the picture, then disappeared the second Elaine lowered her phone. A few minutes later, while everyone was arguing about appetizers no one had ordered, Meredith leaned close enough that her hair brushed my cheek. Can we talk for 1 second? She whispered. I looked at her. Here. Just don't react. That was never a good opening. She kept her smile aimed at the table while she spoke through it. Mom thinks it might be better if you skip the reunion next weekend. I waited, because sometimes people say something terrible and then rescue themselves in the next sentence. Meredith did not. She just wants 1 weekend without tension, she added. A light weekend. Easy. Across the table, Elaine was smiling at Audrey, Meredith's cousin by marriage, like she wasn't listening to every word. I said quietly, Your mother thinks I shouldn't attend your family reunion. Meredith's eyes flicked toward Caleb, then back to me. Please don't make this a thing. Do you agree with her? She exhaled through her nose. I just don't want drama. That wasn't my question. Jackson, can you please not make this about you? That sentence landed harder than the request itself. Because it told me this wasn't Meredith asking me to help keep peace. This was Meredith asking me to disappear so her family could feel comfortable pretending I had never been useful to them. I looked at Caleb. He was pretending to read something on his phone, but his jaw was tight. He had heard enough. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and reached for the check folder the server had just dropped near Brandon. Brandon's hand moved toward it, then stopped when he realized I was actually taking it. I pulled out my card and said, I'll cover mine. Meredith blinked. Jackson. I wrote the total for my meal, added a tip, signed, and stood. Elaine tilted her head. Leaving already? I looked at her. Yes. Her smile widened just enough. See? This is what I mean. Everything becomes heavy. A year earlier, that would have made me argue. 6 months earlier, I might have asked Meredith if she was going to let her mother talk to me like that. That night, I just put my jacket over my arm. Enjoy your dinner, I said. Caleb started to stand. Meredith grabbed his wrist under the table, not hard, but enough. Honey, stay. We're doing gifts. He looked at me like he wanted instructions. I kept my voice even. Say goodnight when you get home, okay? He nodded, miserable. I walked out without slamming anything. I didn't peel out of the parking lot. I sat in my car for almost 2 minutes with both hands on the steering wheel and let myself feel the embarrassment before I started the engine. At home, the house was quiet in a way that made every small sound sharp. The fridge hummed. The kitchen clock clicked. My phone buzzed before I even hung up my jacket. The family group chat was already buzzing. Elaine had written, so excited for next weekend. Positive energy only. Let's keep the weekend light. Audrey replied with a heart. Someone else asked who was bringing pasta salad. Brandon sent a gif of a guy dancing with the words, "No bad vibes." Then Meredith texted me privately. Please don't punish me for trying to avoid drama. A second later, another message. You know how my mom gets. I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I set it face down on the kitchen table and opened my laptop. There was a folder on my desktop named Home Receipts. Inside it was another folder named B Timeline. Meredith had never asked about it, probably because she assumed I was too tired to do anything but complain. I had stopped arguing months before that dinner. I had started saving things instead. Bank statements, highlighted by date. Zelle screenshots. Venmo requests from Brandon with little notes like bridge until Friday and we'll make it right. Text messages where he promised repayment, then changed the subject. Emails where I asked for full documents and got partial attachments back. Screenshots of Meredith asking me not to embarrass her family. And one voicemail from Elaine that changed everything for me. The voicemail had come in by accident, or at least I believed it had. Meredith had forwarded me a string of messages about Caleb's schedule, and attached in the middle of them was an audio file from Elaine. It was only 19 seconds long. I listened to it once, then 3 more times, then saved it. Elaine's voice was calm and irritated, the way she sounded when a restaurant didn't have the table she wanted. Just don't show Jackson every page yet. He'll get difficult. Once it's settled, he always calms down. We need this handled before the reunion, not dragged through one of his interrogations. When I asked Meredith about it that night, she went pale. What is this? I asked, holding up my phone. She wiped her hands on her jeans, even though they weren't wet. Mom was just venting. About what paperwork? Jackson, don't start. That's not an answer. It's Brandon's thing. It's not even finalized. What thing? She closed her eyes. Can you not make this harder? That was when I contacted an attorney for the first time. I didn't tell Meredith right away. Not because I wanted to trap her, and not because I was trying to punish anyone. I did it because every private conversation had become a room where my concerns went to die. I needed someone outside Elaine's circle to tell me if I was overreacting. I was not. Brandon had been trying to secure a financial arrangement. I'm not going to pretend I understood every piece of it at first, because that was part of the problem. The documents he showed me were incomplete. He wanted me to confirm that I was aware of his plan and that I had supported similar family obligations before. His words were casual. The paperwork was not. The first time he emailed me about it, the subject line was simple, quick confirm. The attachment was a PDF with missing pages. I replied, send the full document. I'm not confirming anything I haven't read. He texted me 2 minutes later. Bro, it's not that deep. I wrote back, then sending the full document should be easy. No answer. Later that night, Meredith stood in our bedroom doorway while I was folding laundry. Why do you always treat my family like they're trying to scam you? She asked. I put down one of Caleb's hoodies. Why do they always need me to agree before I'm allowed to read? She rubbed her forehead. Brandon feels judged by you. Brandon asked me to attach my name to something and won't show me the whole thing. You're making it sound shady. It sounds shady without my help. Meredith's mouth tightened. Please don't embarrass my family. That text came later too. Same wording. Please don't embarrass my family. Not please protect yourself. Not I'll ask Brandon for the full pages. Not you're right. This is strange. Please don't embarrass my family. So I built the timeline. Quietly. Every transfer. Every message. Every request. Every time Brandon used the word bridge. Every time Elaine framed accountability as cruelty. Every time Meredith asked me to keep peace when what she really meant was keep quiet. My attorney reviewed what I had and advised me to stop speaking by phone about anything related to Brandon's finances. Everything in writing. No verbal commitments. No casual confirmations. No family meetings without records. When Brandon called, I let it go to voicemail. When Elaine texted, call me, this is getting ridiculous, I replied, please put your questions in writing. That enraged her. You're making this ugly, she wrote. I almost replied, you made it ugly when you tried to keep me from seeing the pages with my name attached. Instead, I took a screenshot and saved it. By the time Meredith told me I was not welcome at the reunion, my attorney had already prepared a civil filing asking the court to confirm that I had not authorized Brandon to represent me as a guarantor, backer, silent participant, or anything close to it. It wasn't a criminal accusation. It wasn't me trying to ruin Brandon's life. It was a legal line around my name, my credit, and my consent. The filing went public earlier than I expected, but I had known it would become public eventually. That was the part Elaine and Brandon didn't understand. They thought shame only worked one way. They could exclude me, talk about me, imply I was bitter, difficult, intense, too heavy for a family weekend, and I would keep absorbing it privately because that was what I had always done. At 6:43 the next morning, my phone rang. Caleb. I answered immediately because he almost never called that early. Dad, he whispered. I sat up in bed. What's wrong? There were muffled voices behind him. Adults. Angry adults. Dad, is this real? What's real? Your name is in a lawsuit against Uncle Brandon. His voice cracked on lawsuit. Grandma is downstairs yelling, and Uncle Brandon said you're trying to destroy him. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not because I was surprised, but because my son shouldn't have found out from adults yelling in a hallway. Where are you? I asked. The guest room. Door closed. Yeah. Okay. Listen to me. Don't argue with anyone. Don't defend me. Don't answer questions. Put your shoes by the door and keep your phone on. Did Mom know? He asked. That question hurt more than anything Elaine could have said. I'm going to come get you, I said. We'll talk in person. Dad, I know. Is your name really on paperwork? My name was used in a way I didn't agree to. I'm handling it. There was a pause. Then Caleb whispered, Mom knew. I'm coming. By the time I got dressed, the family group chat had exploded. Elaine, you had no right to make this public. Brandon, are you serious right now? You're blowing up my life over paperwork. Meredith, why would you blindside me like this? Elaine again, take it down. Today. Brandon, don't act like I stole from you. Then one message disappeared. Brandon had deleted it, but not before my phone's notification preview caught enough of it. You knew what I meant when you said you'd help fam. I screenshotted the notification log. Saved it. Meredith called 3 times. Brandon called twice. Elaine called once, then texted, answer your phone like an adult. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I drove to Elaine's house. I didn't go inside. I parked at the curb and texted Caleb. I'm outside. He came out 2 minutes later wearing the same hoodie from the birthday dinner, backpack over one shoulder, face pale. Meredith followed him onto the porch. Jackson, she said, hurrying down the steps. Can we not do this in front of him? I looked past her to Caleb. Get in the car, bud. He did. Meredith lowered her voice. You filed something against my brother and didn't tell me. You knew there was paperwork with my name attached and didn't tell me the truth. Her eyes filled quickly, but I had learned tears could be real and still be used to move the conversation away from facts. I didn't know it would become this, she said. What did you think would happen? I thought we could smooth it over. You thought you could manage my reaction. She flinched. Elaine appeared in the doorway behind her, arms folded, fully dressed at 7 in the morning like she had been waiting for an audience. Jackson, enough. You are scaring everyone. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because there she was, turning a legal boundary into a personality flaw. I'm taking Caleb home, I said. Elaine stepped onto the porch. This family has private matters. You don't put them in public records because your feelings got hurt. I nodded once. The paperwork with my name on it made it public. Brandon shouted from somewhere inside. You're a joke, man. Caleb's shoulders hunched in the passenger seat. I opened my car door. Meredith grabbed my sleeve lightly. Please, just talk to me. Put it in writing. Her hand dropped. On the drive home, Caleb stared out the window for 6 blocks before he spoke. Did Uncle Brandon fake your signature? No. He turned toward me. Then what did he do? He used old messages and partial conversations to make it look like I had agreed to back something I hadn't agreed to. That's the simple version. And Grandma knew? She knew I hadn't seen everything. Mom. I kept my eyes on the road. Your mom knew more than she told me. He nodded once, hard, like he was trying not to cry and mad at himself for it. At home, I made eggs because I needed something normal to do with my hands. Caleb didn't eat much. He sat at the kitchen island and watched me move around the stove. Are you and Mom getting divorced? He asked. I turned off the burner. I don't know. He looked down. She always says you make stuff harder. I know. But you don't. I had to grip the counter for a second. I appreciate you saying that, I told him. But you don't have to take sides. You're allowed to love both of us. He gave a small, bitter laugh. Adults always say that after they make sides. He wasn't wrong. Later that morning, I sent one email. I didn't send it in anger. I wrote it, reread it, took out every insult I wanted to include, and made the subject line boring on purpose. Timeline and documents regarding Brandon's use of my name. I sent it to Meredith, Elaine, Brandon, Audrey, Thomas, and a few relevant relatives who had either been pulled into the reunion planning or had apparently been told I was losing my mind over a birthday dinner. The email was short. Since my name is now being discussed without the full story, I'm attaching the timeline and documents my attorney already has. I will not debate this by phone or in the family chat. Any financial matter involving my name needs to go through my attorney. I will not cover Brandon's debt, sign anything retroactively, or confirm any document I did not receive in full before my name was used. Then the attachments. Transfers. Messages. Voicemail. Paperwork. Attorney email. The timeline was plain. Dates, amounts, screenshots, and short notes. No dramatic labels. No proof they hate me. Just records. March 4th. Brandon requested $800 by Zelle, described as 2-week bridge. No full repayment received. April 19th. Brandon requested $1,200. Request declined. Elaine texted, You're putting Meredith in a terrible position. May 3rd, Brandon emailed partial PDF and requested confirmation. Full document requested. Not provided. May 6th, Meredith texted, please don't embarrass my family. May 7th, voicemail from Elaine to Meredith. Don't show Jackson every page yet. May 9th, Brandon texted, you knew what I meant. June 2nd, attorney consulted. I attached the voicemail transcript too, but I also attached the audio file because I knew Elaine would claim I had twisted her words. The family group chat went quiet for 9 minutes. Then Brandon wrote, this is insane. A second later, he deleted it. Then he wrote, you're taking stuff out of context. Thomas replied before I did. What context makes don't show Jackson every page yet better? That was the first crack. Thomas was an older relative on Meredith's side. Practical, quiet, not dramatic. He was the kind of man who read warranty booklets before buying appliances. Elaine had always treated him with careful respect because he wasn't easy to flatter or bully. Brandon didn't respond to him. Audrey messaged me privately 10 minutes later. Is that voicemail real? I replied with only the audio file again. A few minutes passed. Then she wrote, I only heard Elaine's side. I stared at that sentence for a while. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the first honest thing anyone in that family had sent me all morning. I wrote back, that's what she wanted. Audrey replied, I'm sorry. I thought you were angry about the reunion. I almost said I was angry about the reunion. I was. But the reunion wasn't the disease. It was the symptom. So I wrote, the reunion was when they stopped pretending this was about family. By noon, Elaine had started a separate thread, then apparently realized I wasn't in it and couldn't be managed there. Meredith called again. I didn't answer. She texted, please talk to me like your wife. I replied, I will talk about our marriage. I will not discuss Brandon's legal issues by phone. She wrote, you're choosing money over marriage. That one sat on my screen like a stain. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Finally, I wrote, no. I'm choosing consent over pressure. She didn't answer. That night, Caleb and I ordered takeout and watched a game. Or tried to. He kept checking his phone, then putting it face down. Around the 3rd quarter, he said, Mom asked if I'm mad at her. What did you say? He shrugged. I said I don't know. That's fair. She asked if you told me to ignore her. I paused the game. I didn't. I know. He stared at the TV. I don't like that she asked it like that. Neither did I. The reunion was supposed to start the next afternoon. By Friday morning, no one seemed excited about positive energy anymore. Brandon had apparently called Thomas asking for help because Jackson froze everything. Thomas replied in the family chat, I'm not discussing money with you until you explain every document and every name attached to it. Elaine wrote, this is not appropriate for a group chat. Thomas replied, it was appropriate to tell people Jackson was bitter. The documents are appropriate too. Audrey added, I agree. That was the second crack, and Elaine felt it. You could tell by the way her messages changed from polished to clipped. Enough. Everyone take a breath. Nobody answered. Meredith came home that afternoon. I heard her key in the door while Caleb was upstairs. She stepped into the kitchen looking like she had aged 3 years in one day. No makeup, hair pulled back, birthday flowers still on the counter from the night before because I hadn't touched them. Can we talk? She asked. I closed my laptop. About our marriage? Her mouth trembled. Yes. I nodded to the chair across from me. She sat, but she didn't take off her coat. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she said, I didn't know Brandon would use it that way. I leaned back. That is not the same as saying you didn't know. Her eyes shone. I knew he wanted your name to help him look stable. I knew Mom thought you would say no if you saw the full thing too early. I thought. She stopped. You thought what? I thought once it was handled, you'd be mad, but we'd get past it. I let that sit between us. That is almost exactly what your mother said on the voicemail. Meredith wiped under one eye. I know. And you were okay with that. I wasn't okay. I was trying to keep everything from blowing up. No, Meredith. You were trying to keep them from being uncomfortable. You were fine with me being uncomfortable. She looked down at her hands. I asked, did you know your mother was going to ask you to uninvite me from the reunion? She didn't say it like that. How did she say it? She said maybe you needed a weekend to cool off. From paperwork I wasn't supposed to know about. Meredith closed her eyes. Did Brandon know I wasn't coming? I asked. Yes. That one made me laugh once, quietly. So, I was too difficult to sit at the table, but not too difficult to use on paperwork. She whispered, I'm sorry. I believe she was sorry. I just didn't know if she was sorry for what she had done or sorry that it had become impossible to smooth over. Before I could answer, Caleb came downstairs. He stopped when he saw her. Hey, honey, Meredith said softly. He looked at her for a second. Did you know before Dad did? She inhaled. Caleb, did you? Her face crumpled. I knew some of it. He nodded like he had expected that and still hated hearing it. Okay. Can we talk? She asked. Not right now. He walked back upstairs. Meredith put a hand over her mouth and cried quietly. I didn't comfort her. That may sound cold, but for years I had been trained to respond to her distress by dropping my own. I couldn't do it anymore. After a while, she said, Mom wants everyone to meet tonight. To clear the air. I looked at her. Does she want to clear the air or control the room? She's upset. I'm sure. Jackson, please. Can we just talk like a family? That depends on whether you mean family or audience. She flinched again. Audrey and Thomas will be there. Good. So you'll come. I'll come with printed records. I won't discuss legal strategy. I won't agree to anything verbally. And if your mother starts rewriting facts, I'll leave. Meredith nodded slowly. Okay. I stood and went to the small cabinet where I kept the folder. It was already printed. That night, I walked into Elaine's house with a manila folder under my arm. Not dramatic. Not thick enough to look like a movie prop. Just enough paper to make dishonest people nervous. The living room was arranged like a polite ambush. Elaine sat in the armchair she always used during holidays, the one that faced everyone else. Brandon stood by the fireplace with his arms crossed. Meredith sat on the couch, eyes red. Audrey was near the window, quiet. Thomas sat at the dining table with reading glasses hanging from his shirt collar. Nobody offered me a drink. Elaine began before I fully sat down. I want to say first that I am deeply disappointed, she said, using her hostess voice. Private family matters should never be dragged into public like this. I placed the folder on my lap. Brandon scoffed. Private? He wanted it public. That's the whole point. Meredith said, Jackson, you could have handled this privately. I looked at her. I tried. Privately is where everyone lied. The room went still. Elaine's eyes sharpened. That is unfair. Which part? The accusation that we lied. I opened the folder but didn't take anything out yet. Did Brandon send me the full document before using my name? Brandon threw up his hands. Using your name. You keep saying that like I stole your identity. I didn't say that. That's what you want people to think. Thomas spoke from the dining table. Then explain what happened. Brandon looked annoyed, like Thomas had interrupted a performance. It was a family financing thing. Jackson had helped before. I referenced that. That's it. I looked at him. You represented that I was aware and supportive. You were aware of missing pages. Elaine cut in. Because you make everything impossible, Jackson. Everyone knows if you had seen one sentence you didn't like, you would have turned it into a trial. Audrey glanced down at her phone, probably at the voicemail transcript. I said, so you agree I wasn't shown every page. Elaine's mouth tightened. That is not what I said. It's what your voicemail said. Brandon laughed, but it came out wrong. A voicemail. Great. We're doing evidence now. Yes, I said. We are. Meredith looked at the floor. Elaine stood, smoothing the front of her blouse. You know, Jackson, this is exactly why people feel tense around you. You don't come to resolve. You come to punish. You sat at my daughter's birthday dinner with this in your pocket. No. I sat at your daughter's birthday dinner and got told I wasn't welcome at a family reunion because I make people tense. Elaine's expression barely changed, but I saw the satisfaction flicker in her eyes. And maybe that was the right decision. Because family doesn't do this. You were never really one of us if you could put Brandon's future at risk over your pride. There it was. The sentence that finally cut through the last thread of me wanting her approval. I stood, placed the folder on the coffee table, and opened it. I was family when you needed my name, I said. I was family when you needed my money. I was family when Brandon needed a short-term bridge that never seemed to end. But I was too difficult to sit at your table. That ends today. Nobody moved. I pulled out the first tab. Transfers, I said. Dates, amounts, repayment promises. Brandon muttered, oh my God. Second tab. Messages. including Brandon asking me to confirm a document he refused to send in full. Third, voicemail. Elaine saying not to show me every page until after things were settled. Elaine snapped. That was taken out of context. Thomas stood and crossed the room. Let me see it. Elaine turned on him. Thomas. No, he said. Let me see it. I handed him the transcript. He read slowly, lips pressed together. Audrey moved closer and read over his shoulder. Her face changed first. Not shock exactly. Shame. Thomas looked at Brandon. Why was Jackson's name in paperwork before he saw the full document? Brandon shifted. It wasn't like that. What was it like? I used prior support to show family backing. That's normal. Did he consent to this document? Brandon looked at Meredith. That told the room more than his answer would have. Meredith put both hands in her lap and whispered. He hadn't seen all of it. Elaine's head whipped toward her. Meredith. Meredith started crying again, but this time she kept talking. He hadn't. I knew he hadn't. I thought Brandon just needed it to move things along, and then we would explain it after. I looked at her. After my name had already helped him. She nodded, barely. Brandon pointed at me. You knew what I meant when I said family backing. No, I said. You hoped I wouldn't ask what you meant until it was too late. That's not fair. What isn't fair is needing my name on Monday and wanting me out of the room by Friday. Thomas looked at Brandon. That is exactly what happened, isn't it? Brandon's face reddened. I didn't want him out of the room. Mom thought he'd make a scene. Audrey's voice was quiet. He didn't make a scene at dinner. Elaine glared at her. You weren't involved. Audrey looked up. I was involved enough to be told he was bitter and controlling. Elaine's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I had known her, she didn't have the room in her hand. Meredith wiped her cheeks. Jackson, I didn't think they'd use it like that. I turned to her. You knew they were using it. That was enough. She folded in on herself. Brandon tried one more time. Look, I'm sorry if the wording made you uncomfortable, but you're blowing up my life over paperwork. I said no. I'm removing myself from paperwork I never approved. Elaine's voice went cold. And what exactly do you want from us? Nothing. That seemed to throw her more than anger would have. I don't want an apology you don't mean, I said. I don't want another family dinner where everyone pretends I imagined what happened. I don't want a seat at a reunion where my presence is treated like a burden. I want my name removed from anything Brandon attached it to. I want no one in this room to imply I backed him financially. I want all communication about this in writing or through my attorney. And I will not sign anything retroactively. Brandon said, so you're just going to let me drown. You are not drowning because I stopped being a life raft. You are facing the water you walked into. Meredith flinched at that, but she didn't defend him. I looked at her next. And you and I will discuss our marriage in counseling or not at all. I am not having another private conversation where I explain why lying to me is a problem and you explain why confronting your mother is hard. Elaine scoffed. Counseling. Of course. I picked up the folder, leaving copies of the timeline on the table. One more thing, I said. Everyone looked at me. You don't get to exclude me from the family and keep using me as the family safety net. Then I left. Meredith didn't follow me out. I was grateful for that. The fallout wasn't instant fireworks. Real consequences usually arrive as a series of smaller doors closing. The reunion technically happened, but from what Audrey told me later, half the people didn't show, and the ones who did spent most of the weekend whispering in separate rooms. Elaine tried to enforce positive energy only, but that phrase didn't have the same power after everyone had read the voicemail. A new group chat formed without Elaine. I did not ask to be added, but Audrey sent me a screenshot with the caption, for transparency. In it, Thomas wrote, no one should give Brandon money until the documents are explained. Another cousin asked, was Jackson actually told not to come? Audrey answered, yes. For once, Elaine didn't get to define the truth before anyone else saw it. Brandon called me from a block number the next week. I answered because I didn't recognize it. You happy? He said. I almost hung up, then remembered my attorney's advice. Put whatever you need to say in writing. You're really doing that? Yes. You think you're better than everyone? No. I think I can say no. He laughed sharply. You're going to regret this when Meredith realizes what kind of man you are. She already knows what kind of man I am. That's why your plan depended on me calming down. He went quiet for half a second. Then I hung up and wrote down the time of the call. Elaine tried a different route. She sent Caleb a text that said, "I hope you know grown-up problems are complicated and your father is very hurt right now." Caleb showed it to me without saying anything. I said, "You don't have to answer." He nodded. "I'm not going to." A few days later, Meredith found out and called her mother. I heard part of it from the hallway. "Do not pull Caleb into this," Meredith said. I stopped walking. Elaine's voice buzzed through the phone, too faint for words. "No," Meredith said. "I mean it. You don't get to make him manage your feelings too." It was the first time in years I heard Meredith set a boundary with her mother without looking at me like I had forced her to. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase what she had done. But I noticed it. Caleb stayed with me that weekend instead of going to the reunion. We ordered wings, watched a game, and let the house be quiet without pretending quiet meant peace. At one point he looked over and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Getting there." He nodded. "Me too." That was enough. The legal process continued. It wasn't dramatic. There were letters, revisions, attorney emails, and a lot of waiting. Brandon had to respond through proper channels instead of emotional ambushes. He could no longer call something a misunderstanding and count on Elaine to make the room nod along. Thomas refused to help him financially until he produced every page of every document connected to the arrangement. Audrey apologized to me in person 2 weeks later, standing awkwardly on my front porch with a container of muffins she clearly brought because she didn't know what else to do with her hands. "I only heard Elaine's side," she said again. "I know. I should have asked." "Yeah," I said. "Not cruelly. Just honestly." She nodded. "Yeah." I accepted the apology. I didn't accept the muffins as payment for years of being treated like an outsider, but Caleb ate 3 of them before dinner, so they served a purpose. Brandon's financial mess didn't magically disappear. It became his. That was the real punishment for him. Not jail. Not some dramatic public collapse. Just the loss of the family fog machine that had always made his choices look like bad luck and everyone else's boundaries look like betrayal. Elaine's punishment was quieter, but probably worse for her. People started asking follow-up questions. Thomas stopped letting her summarize conflicts before anyone else spoke. Audrey corrected her in real time when Elaine said things like, "Jackson took it personally." Audrey would say, "His name was on the paperwork." Elaine hated that. Meredith faced the part one thing she feared most. Caleb stopped confiding in her for a while. He wasn't cruel. He answered her. He hugged her when she asked. But something had shifted in him. He watched her more carefully. One evening, I heard him ask her from the kitchen, "When you say you're keeping peace, do you mean for everyone or just Grandma?" Meredith did not answer right away. Then she said, "I'm trying to figure that out." I stayed in the hallway and let that be their conversation. Meredith and I started counseling because that was my condition, and to her credit, she didn't argue once we were there. The first session was uncomfortable in a way I needed it to be. She tried, at first, to explain how afraid she was of Elaine's reactions, how Brandon had always been protected, how saying no in her family felt like setting the house on fire. The counselor listened, then asked, "And when you avoided setting that fire, where did the heat go?" Meredith looked at me. I didn't rescue her from the answer. A week after that first session, she came into the kitchen while I was sorting through another packet from my attorney. The house was dim except for the light above the sink. Caleb was upstairs, supposedly doing homework, probably texting his friends. Meredith stood across from me, arms wrapped around herself. "I didn't realize how many times I asked you to disappear so my family could feel comfortable," she said. I looked up from the papers. There was no performance in her voice. No careful wording. No, you know how my mom gets. Just exhaustion and truth. It was the first honest thing she had said in months that didn't come with an excuse attached. "I'm glad you realize it," I said. She swallowed. "Is that enough to keep trying?" "No." Her face fell, but I kept going. "It's enough to start telling the truth. Repair is different." She nodded slowly. "I'll talk about our marriage," I said, "when you're ready to be my wife, not your mother's spokesperson." "I want to be," she whispered. "I hope that's true." I didn't move to hug her. She didn't ask me to. For once, the space between us was honest. People like Elaine count on everyone confusing discomfort with danger. If the room feels tense, blame the person who named the problem. If someone asks for documents, call them distrustful. If someone stops paying, call them selfish. If someone finally protects themselves, call it betrayal. For years, I thought if I stayed useful enough, calm enough, generous enough, I would eventually be treated like family without conditions. But some people don't offer belonging. They rent it out, one favor at a time. I kept my documents organized. I kept the legal case moving. I kept my finances protected. I stopped answering calls that should have been emails. I stopped explaining basic consent to people who only respected boundaries when they were the ones drawing them. And I stopped chasing acceptance from a table where my place depended on how much I was willing to absorb. That was the first time in years I didn't ask for a seat at their table. I just took my name off